2-minute warning, everybody good?
As good as
2 minutes.
everybody is.
Okay. I hope I have enough battery. I have 50, that'll be all right.
Wow, so nobody's going to show up?
Yeah, I'm certain.
Citizens or otherwise? Okay.
Well, the door wasn't unlocking properly, so hopeful that Sharon went back to check. Is the door opening now? Okay. People waiting outside.
I came in fine.
Okay,
Okay,
So
good.
when I was 10.
Maybe we were just a few minutes earlier than the set.
maybe.
Okay.
Maybe you can't program it open until after 3:30 or something.
Oh, yeah, it's more new learning for me today. I've had enough, I think.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the December 17th, 2024 Matthews County School Board Budget Work Session and public employee requests for the 2025-2026 school budget. Item 2, we'll begin with 2.1 with the public budget requests. Is there anyone who would like to approach the podium regarding public or employee requests for the 2025-2026 school budget?
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Randy Applegate, Matthews High School. I'm here to advocate for a line item funding specifically designated for consumables and competition needs for our CTE programs. As you know, CTE is a vital part of our students' educational journey, providing them with hands-on experience and practical skills that are critical to the workforce readiness. However, unlike surrounding communities, Matthews operates on a significantly smaller scale program that strives to meet the standards and outcomes. To ensure our students receive high quality education, instruction, and training, we are requesting a dedicated budget consideration for adequate funding to cover consumables and other learning essentials. One area of particular concern is the rising cost of materials in our programs. While we have been fortunate to have been funded through several grants, it is important to note that the grants are often content and item specific. Most grants don't cover consumables. Further situations are different by program. For example, engineering has a lot less per student cost than carpentry. Engineering uses about $100 per student per year, whereas carpentry is significantly, exponentially larger. As material costs continue to rise, relying solely on grant funding creates unnecessary uncertainty and limits our ability to maintain quality scope of our offerings. Another potential issue that we face is the existence of the pay-to-play scenario, student fees. While students may be asked to pay class fees or a specific project cost to participate, the model creates inequity, and some students may not have the financial resources to cover these fees, effectively limiting our access to vulnerable learning experiences. A lack of dedicated funding could exacerbate this problem, creating barriers for students who would otherwise thrive in our program. Additionally, it is important to acknowledge the burden placed on our teachers. Some of our teachers feel like they're more of a sales staff or business owners rather than educators. As we spend a significant amount of time fundraising, seeking donations, and managing costs instead of focusing on instruction. This diversion of time and energy away from our teaching duties stresses the overall effectiveness of our programs and the quality of our student learning. We are proud of what we have accomplished with the resources that we have available to our program size and limited access to consumable funding. This puts us at a little bit of disadvantage compared to other CTE programs in the region. Securing a system in place for a budget that would provide stability and equity, enabling us to sustain and grow our offerings to enhance student engagement. I respectfully request the board consider working toward this allocation as an investment in our students. By ensuring we have the necessary funding of consumables and essential student supplies, we can continue to offer meaningful hands-on learning experiences for our students as they grow and as they need to be able to thrive. A couple situations that have come up, I don't know how much time I have, but just real quick. We have students that are underprivileged. One in particular I'm thinking of is wanting to build a kitchen table for their trailer home. We cannot fairly fund that for that particular student due to the $500-600 cost of materials for the table. And it creates an inequity position for us to being able to offer that situation to other kids. Whereas if we are drawing from a pool, we can better allocate funds to general resources for that class and people helping her on that project in the class. Just one situation. I've failed to give this. I do have some solutions that I typed up, possible solutions, all open for discussion. But, you know, and the amount is somewhat, you know, up in the air. But to be honest with you, right now we're spending about $10,000 a year just on carpentry. The other programs, not so much, you know, $50, $80 a student type thing. But all that is coming out of individual specific grants that we write for our programs. It's coming out of some big ticket grants that we get, but there's very limited. For instance, that $125,000 grant that I got last year for the Building Trades program, none of that could go to materials. Our Perkins Fund, none of that applies to consumables. So we are limited in what we can do, and a lot of the grants that we write are limited in the same way. I'm going to give you a copy of basically what I just said and the solutions.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Applegate. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the podium?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Daniel, Ms. Hunley, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I, too, would like to request that our school division incorporate a line item for additional funding for the CTE department. As you are all aware, CTE growth is one of the components in our strategic planning, and since we obtain Perkins funding based on student enrollment, our grant money is relatively small and has to be rationed out amongst the current course offerings. In the first 2 years of family and consumer science classes, student fees in the amount of $10 per student were collected from grades 6, 7, and 8 to offset the cost of expendable items such as food ingredients, polyfill, elastic, detergent for washing dishes, aprons, and towels. Perkins funds, as you know, cannot be utilized for these items. This year, no fees were collected from the nutrition and wellness students or any of the 8th grade students who were moved to the high school. The lack of student fees cost my programs, according to Ms. Wheeler, approximately $775 this year alone. As the board is aware, I have spent the last 3 years fundraising and collecting material donations that the community has so generously provided, which gave us things to start the classes with. To stretch the financial donations and multiply what has been given, I have used the Student Knife Skills Lab, where they make soup, to sell quarts of soup. to make for faculty and staff, earning back the cost of the ingredients and turning a small profit each time. Last year, we hosted the Seahawk Cafe Cart, selling cookies, donuts, muffins, coffee, juice, and cider to faculty, staff, and students, earning back the cost of the ingredients and turning a small profit that could then be reinvested in each consecutive cooking lab. Each year, I have used donated materials to host a Make and Take holiday ornament fundraiser. During intramural basketball, my FCCLA and FCS students have hosted concession sales to earn additional funds. Notifying the Matthews community about taking my FCCLA students to state and national conferences raised thousands of dollars to enable students who would never have been able to afford to go the opportunities of a lifetime. What the board may not be aware of is the time and hours that I personally have invested in speaking to local civic organizations and collaborating with them to write grants. Twice a year, my students and I volunteer with the Weighted Angels organization at their stuffing parties, wherein we are the beneficiaries of the leftover polyfill that aren't used in the animals. I bring them back in garbage bags full, and they can use them as a free resource for their projects. This free resource has enabled my students to make a variety of sewing projects, but once it's gone, more has to be purchased. Parents and community members have donated Food Lion gift cards, groceries, and cash for purchasing ingredients. Part of building this program is showing the community what the students are doing with what has been given to them, and that I strive to be as frugal and responsible as possible with every dollar. We have made cookies for Meals on Wheels, food trays for Matthews High School prom, refreshment for the STEM Expos, Founders Day celebration, the Art of Living exhibition, and this Thursday night, the Taste, Sights, and Sounds of the Seasons band concert and electives exhibition, all of which did not get reimbursed. Any kind of money came out of that. This week alone, we're baking the Christmas cookies that are on your tables, a gift from us to you for all that you do for us, as well as the same for our bus drivers who are often overlooked at this time of year, and we are also selling them by the dozen, again, to offset the cost of the ingredients. My students are not just playing in the kitchen. They are experiencing firsthand how to shop, prepare, and be safe in a work environment, and hopefully learning how to take a skill and turn it around into a profit. Each food lab costs anywhere from $100 to $400 because of the number of students. Each food lab, depending on the event and the amount of ingredients donated. A 20-pound box of polyfill used to stuff pillows and their pumpkins costs about $100 when it's not on sale. That's for one box. This year, the students made repurposed recycled sweater pumpkins and pillows, and we would have used approximately 3 boxes full, just with those 2 projects. Fortunately, we were able to use what we had donated to us at this time. It's all gone now. I have to go buy more. One of the points from the strategic planning session over the summer was providing professional development opportunities for CTE teachers. According to Mr. Applegate, Perkins funds are allocated on a rotating basis to the teachers, which unfortunately leads to someone not having the opportunity to attend. In the most recent CTE Advisory Council meeting, discussions were had regarding the amount of time we as CTE teachers are spending outside of contract hours working to fund our programs. Not to mention the commitment to ensure that our students are provided travel opportunities that they might never get any other time elsewhere. I have worked with students after school, on the weekends, over spring and summer vacation breaks to create, develop, and implement the FCCLA competition pieces that have earned both state and national recognition. I have done this for my students, not for me, don't misunderstand. However, in years past, I was not compensated for those additional hours. I would like the school board to not only consider the line item in the upcoming budget for expendable items and professional development opportunities, as well as a stipend to compensate those of us teachers for the hours we currently donate administering our career and technical service organizations, which is an important competency outlined in the CTE list of student required competencies for each course. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. If you don't mind, thank you. Members, do you have any responses so far? Would we like Dr. Daniel to move on to the survey. Mr. Dobson?
I had talked to the, mine went blank. Huh?
Ms. Williams.
Ms. Williams, that's it. I had talked to her about 6 months ago about trying to find funding for CTE materials. Because I think initially you charge, what, $10 up front?
Correct, sir.
$10 ain't gonna go far. And the amount that goes into it, and I know they're always selling some, always. And that puts a lot of pressure on kids, in my opinion. Nothing in the world, I remember when I was in school, I had to go sell stuff because I belonged to this. So that puts pressure on kids, and I don't like to see that, especially younger ones. And I don't think there's a reason why in the world we can't find some money to fund the cooking class and Mr. Appleby's classes. I know we're strapped for money and everything, but if they could do half of the fundraising and get some money, I think that would be a little bit better off. And I know you're always busy. I see you all the time. You're busy. And I understand that, and we shouldn't have to do that. That's my opinion.
Ms. Diggs?
I'll speak to. I just want to thank both of you for what you said today, and thank you for your gift up here. And I know these students, they gain so much because we've listened to them, you know, and we've seen yours in action. And I certainly am for what Mr. Dawson has said, trying to find the money for you guys and for your children.
Mrs. Hodges?
First of all, thank you for taking the time to come and speak today. I do have a couple questions, because carpentry it's clear when you talk about consumables there. Could you just elaborate for me some of the other consumables, and I understand with your program what they might be, some of the other classes and what those consumables might be, so I have a better understanding.
As far as I'm concerned, we have consumables, and we do model homes in the architecture class that have the...
Mr. Applegate, I'm sorry, could you take the podium, please? Thank you.
As far as our programs go, other than carpentry, we have model homes that we build for architecture class that are, 125 apiece. We project those together, but that's just one project. And then we have scientific notebooks that we use for the engineering classes. We have some modeling blocks that we use for 3D modeling to let them build different parts, and those are wooden blocks that they use, and they end up at the end of about a 4-week project, they keep the wooden puzzle that they build. So there's just things like that, and it comes to the tune of about $60 to $80 per student for my classes. The architecture is a little bit more than that. And Ms. Hayes is similar. Hers aren't quite as much. She's about 40 to 60 per student in our classes. But, it all adds up to the tune of, $2,000 to $3,000 that we are basically having to go out and get ourselves or spend ourselves or whatever it is, because it doesn't fall into a category from Perkins or somewhere else. But those are the type of things. I could get you a list. I'd be glad to get you a
No, I just wanted to
class
get a
list.
better understanding.
Yeah.
Some were more obvious than others to me.
The cartridge for the color printers.
Well, I wondered if those was part of it.
All those are considered consumables,
Okay.
and we just,
So,
get spent.
so from the, I don't know if you two have talked, but for the CTE as a whole, what kind of additional monies are you thinking you would like to be put in a line item in the budget for this next year? What's your wish
What I'd like to see and
list?
what we can do.
Realistically,
It's about, right now, we're spending about $15,000 on consumables, give or take.
Does
each
that
year.
include Ms. Williams' courses as well?
Yeah, that includes all the money that I have oversee.
Okay, and what,
I don't oversee a lot of her stuff because she's doing it, a lot of it on her own.
okay,
And that's what we want to try to alleviate, her having, and
Right,
the other
exactly.
teachers having to do stuff on their own.
exactly. So how much, Ms. Williams, would you add to that?
Mine usually runs somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 2,500 a year.
In total,
Historically,
in total.
For the year, yes.
Is that just consumables?
That's consumable.
Yeah.
I mean, to this point, the only thing that I have asked Perkins for is a new refrigerator and a new stove and a cabinet to put the chemicals in, because we had a safety issue. But those are the only three things, and one KitchenAid mixer was bought by Miss Bird before she left. Everything else has been either donated or fundraised, or grant money, not from the school.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Applegate, what was the amount you told me? Yeah, I should have written it down. You said 15,000, you said?
Right now, we're at about the $15,000 mark, yes.
Oh, I
Per
see.
year.
I hadn't read that yet. Okay, thank you. And what is your thinking about, pay to play? How, I mean, that's kind of a,
Well, if
You
you,
know,
a
dicey
student that
kind
want
of
to take
situation.
architecture class, I've got 3 students in architecture. Each one of those, is paying a $120 fee to take the class. That's an exorbitant amount for some families.
so you're talking the front end. You're not talking about going to some competition or anything like that. You're talking about just to be able to take the class.
Yeah, well,
Okay, I misunderstood.
$30 of my $80 per kid is for Skills USA, or
Okay.
whatever we decide, this year we're going to do TSA. But, whatever the student organization is, there's a cost for that for the student. And that, fortunately, we can take some of that out of Perkins. But then you've got travel fees and hotel and stuff that's not included. That's not part of that plan, so that comes up, just happens to come up, during the year, and we got to figure out how to get them or go out and fundraise or whatever it is, so.
Okay, thank you so much. This is very helpful.
I got another question.
Yes, sir.
Do you do any 3D printing?
I do a lot of 3D printing.
You do a lot?
Yeah.
What is the cost? Just the,
A spool typically typical of PLA plastic
right,
typically cost about $40, $40 to $48, depending on the type of material. There's other types of materials which we're starting to get into, like elastometric, where the spongy stuff.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more, stuff like that. But I'll go through probably 4 spools a year between the 2 machines. What I have not bought a lot of that we have the ability to buy now is engraving medals for certificates and stuff like that. We bought an engraver. We paid for that out of funds, from Perkins, but we don't have the money to buy the materials for it. So, it's a cool thing, and we've been doing little projects with cardboard and wood, but we don't have, we're not meeting all the ability or the potential, if you will, of what we can do with the things that we do have.
now, that 3D printer, is that separate from the rest of the printers in the school system?
We actually have 3, in the high school, we have 3 3D printing units. Actually 4. 2 are 3-axis milling machines, which do metal and wood and plastics and stuff like that. And then there's we have 2 small tabletop that do all the little figurines and gears and little tiny objects. They'll do stuff up to about a 8 by 8 by 8 build. We have 2 of those.
Dr. Daniels, is that separate from your regular printers that we have contracts out on? Or
Yes.
is it in with that?
No, so our 3D printers are completely separate from any of the other copiers or printers that we have in the division. The only students who are, or employees who are going to have access to those are going to be coming through Mr. Applegate or Mr. Williams on this campus.
All right, now they're owned by us or we lease them?
No, they're owned by us.
All
So
of-
we would use Perkins money to purchase those.
Yeah, most of them have been Perkins or Community Foundation money that's purchased.
And Ms. Williams, your refrigerator and oven or stove, whatever you need, does that have to be commercial grade?
Not for current FCS and nutrition and wellness. At the time we expand course offerings, if that is on the table later for Introduction to Culinary or Culinary 1 and 2, at that point, it would have to be an OSHA-certified commercial kitchen.
Okay.
But right now, I have a residential kitchen that I'm covered for the classes that I currently teach.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, just a couple of brief comments. When I was teaching carpentry, there was a course fee of $50 per student, and that was intended to cover consumables such as drill bits, saw blades, screws, nails, glue, that sort of thing that you're going to use up. It was not intended at that time to cover any materials for student projects. Reason being, one student may build a project that costs $30 in material, and one may build a project that costs several hundred, and I had that happen. And I'm saying that to say that every year there was always a few students who could not or did not, for whatever the reason, pay the $50 fee. And no one ever went after the money, so to speak. We were all of the opinion that let's give the student the opportunity to take this class, and somehow it all worked itself out. We built some projects. We built backyard sheds, gazebos. At one point, we built a ton of picnic tables, and we'd make a very modest profit on those things, and that profit went back into the fund for consumables. So I say all that to say I would have no problem whatsoever with the school board finding money to cover consumables. Because, number one, not every student pays the fee for whatever reason. Maybe the family's just not able to pay it. I don't know the circumstances. So I would have no problem at all with that. And I don't know anything about consumables, about projects, so to speak, in your courses, but in carpentry and probably some of Mr. Applegate's courses that he teaches, maybe projects would vary in cost. And I think we would almost have to look to the student or the parents and guardians of the students to cover the cost of projects. However, I would certainly be in favor of covering the cost of consumables, absolutely.
I agree. One point that I disagree, I guess, with Mr. Dobson is the business aspect of the projects. I think selling, learning how to make something to sell, to make a profit, and all of the benefits that go along with learning that, I think that's valuable for children. But I don't think that should be where you rely on getting your funds. I think it is incumbent on the board to be able to seek funding for consumables at an appropriate level. What I would be interested in seeing would be a proposed budget of sorts be presented so that we could have a better idea. There's a lot of numbers floating around. And just one question regarding the architecture class, Mr. Applegate, at $120 per student. Has there ever been a student who has expressed interest in the class but was unable or did not sign up for the class because they knew they were unable to pay that fee that you're aware of? Not that you're aware of. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions or comments? I appreciate your both being here and speaking on this topic and bringing this to our attention. It's very important. And Dr. Daniel, would you like to move into the survey results of? Sure. Thank you.
I apologize to the board. I was anticipating some representation from the faculty staff advisory to help walk through the survey results. So I have access to the survey results, so I'll kind of go over it, but I'll follow up with a slide or the actual results. So for the sake of our discussion right now, I'll kind of read through some of the highlights from the survey, but I'll follow up later with some hard numbers for you all to take a look at. So the survey had 56 responses. It asked some demographic questions. So basically, the demographics were kind of what school do you primarily work at? That was pretty representative of what our population, where they work. So about 34% is the high school, about 29% is the elementary school. Thomas Hunter is about 21%. And then we've got transportation, Office of Special Education, cafeteria staff, school board office, et cetera. So they were given a list of options. So they were asked to choose what is most important to you when considering budget requests for next year. So they could pick one. It wasn't kind of a rank order. It was just what of these items is the most important to you. 53.6% said that increase in salary was the most important piece right now. The second at 28.6% was an increase in staff. Coming in third at 12.5% was facilities improvements. And then the remaining items were technology improvements, health benefits, increase in salary and staff, and increase in clinic supply budget. So again, the overwhelming at about just under 54% was salary increase going into this next budget cycle. At 29, just under 29% was an increase in staff. The survey also offered an opportunity for respondents to add comments, add clarifying pieces, some general, just general comments. Without doing a true qualitative analysis of all of it, I would say, just in glancing through it the last 2 days or so, it's making sure that salaries are competitive with our neighboring school division, staying ahead of cost of living, staying ahead of inflation, being able to recruit and retain teachers, and as the main reasons for salary increases. Some of it gets into a little bit more detail in terms of looking at the individual steps that we've had some conversation about. Our steps, as a reminder, are 1% each step. So do we need to look at an audit of some kind to move to a 1.25 or a 1.5% increase at each step? Some of the staffing concerns relate to really a reaction to where we've reduced in staff over the last year especially. They bring up the library, they bring up our advanced math program. There's requests for additional teacher assistants. One of the pieces that's highlighted with teacher assistants is really related to substitute teachers. And because when we have subs and we can't get subs, then we're pulling TAs, so then we don't have enough TAs to fill the subs when it's probably more of a we don't have enough subs kind of situation. And then talking a little bit about the facilities piece, it really, the bulk of those have to do with our elementary school and just the repeated issues at the elementary school, the boilers turning off, leaking classrooms. I think I'd have to go back and look at the spreadsheet. There were a couple people who talked about it's always freezing in my classroom or it's always piping hot in my classroom. So just looking at the this one screen, I don't know if that's a high school or an elementary school or a Thomas Hunter issue. I'd have to go and look at the spreadsheet and kind of line that location up with that comment. And I didn't go into that much depth prior to this. So
Well, elementary schools is a central system, right?
correct. It's a boiler system with fan coil units in the ceiling and hot water lines and cold water lines.
You shouldn't have no problem with heat if it's a boiler type system.
There are lots of problems currently with the elementary system in terms of you can have malfunctioning dampers and the pneumatic controls within those fan coil units. When the boiler goes offline, then nobody's getting things. So it's a constant massaging of the two boilers and the burners and the pumps, and then if one of them goes offline, the temperature drops in the pipes, then the pipes leak, and then it's tiles, and it's a series of unfortunate events.
The controls and stuff you're talking about, we have a maintenance with one of the companies.
Correct.
Why aren't we getting stuff repaired?
We are. I mean, I've signed a PO for $11,000 today to get a pump, the valves on a pump repaired. So it's a 30-year-old piece of equipment that we've replaced various parts on last year and into this year. We're awaiting an estimate on the cost for repairing the piping. The solution right now appears to be all new piping with welding the joints as opposed to some other kind of solution. I am no HVAC expert. I know way more than I've ever wanted to know about HVAC systems.
Well, they could have used solid pipe to start with, but the other route with the clamps.
I'd like to jump in here and
Like
just
you.
mention that we're going to have the assessment of our school buildings is an item on our agenda, our business meeting. So if we could just keep Dr. Daniel on target with the survey, and then we'll be talking about these issues at length later this evening.
So that kind of encapsulates the survey data from the staff. Again, I'll follow up with some more detailed information and can share those survey results with you all to review. I apologize for kind of the ad hoc presentation currently, so I'll follow up with some more concrete data for you all.
Members, do you have any questions about these basic items that Dr. Daniel has answered?
The people shortage, I mean, you can always hire teachers' aides, right?
No. One, it's got to fit in the budget, and two, it's many cases where we have budgeted positions, it's finding people to do it. Part of that is what the compensation package is for most of our TA positions and where we're constrained with the budget. So, honestly, we really don't compensate our TAs particularly well or particularly competitively within the region. They're typically folks who live locally, who want to be who want to be around kids, who may want to just have the school system's calendar and schedule and it works for their lifestyle as much, probably more so than it does for the compensation piece.
So we've been skating all along on all this.
It's a demographic, an employee group within our division that's not well compensated. I mean, there's lots of our employee groups are compensated below regional average.
Could you possibly, before our next budget work session, give just a couple other counties of what they pay their TAs?
Sure, we can take a look and see what we can pull up.
I don't remember ever getting that information before. Maybe we didn't, I just have forgotten it. And also, secondly, the TAs we have, it's kind of twofold. Some are associated with special education, and some are just TAs to be used as the principals and teachers want, right? The ones in the elementary school, correct?
Correct, the compensation is the same.
Right, I know that, I
Right.
knew that.
So we get federal money for some positions, some of those are local money, yeah.
Right, but some are associated with the IEPs.
Right.
And so therefore, if that student graduates, there might not be a need for another TA to replace that one.
In theory, yes.
Okay.
Our SPED numbers tend to go up, but yes, in theory, yes. If a student had a one-to-one
Right.
with a TA, that student graduates, in theory, yes.
Okay.
Other comments? Dr. Daniel, on the number of respondents, you had 56 respondents. Would you say that's about out of 188 potential employees in the school division, including admin? Is that about right?
It's a relatively low response rate, in
Right.
my opinion. When I did the climate survey, we were at 96. Last year's climate survey was about 112. So I wouldn't expect 100%, but I would say it's a relatively low response rate. So I'll have more conversation with the faculty and staff advisory to kind of figure out how we can do this better next year. Was it poor communication on my part? Was there, were they expecting me to send it out, me to do a presentation, they to do something along those lines?
Did they have
So-
enough time? Was the due date?
I'm not sure.
effective
Yeah,
or
I mean, we talked about it
reasonable?
at my last meeting, so I had kind of a reminder, kind of a check-in, hey, where are we kind of situation. So I'll go back and do some digging.
Right, I just think there's probably some valuable information out there that we don't have.
Agreed.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, moving on to number 3, discussion by board members. Further discussion that anyone would like to have at this point?
On the buildings? Repair of the buildings?
Regarding the public employee requests for the 25-26 school budget.
I don't know if we're at the point where we're going to start cobbling together a budget. I don't know if we're at the point yet we're going to cobble together a budget, but I do think we need, what I'm hearing today is worthy of consideration to include in the budget. I did not realize that there were not enough, taking it away from the focus of one fund that has kept students from getting what they need in the consumables, or the teachers having to be responsible for beg, borrow, and stealing. Not stealing, no, sorry. But it's been burden, the burden is on them to figure out how to fill these gaps. And that can be wearing.
shouldn't be.
1 year you might be able to be energetic about it, but year after year after year, it gets very wearing. And I'm always excited that we have that committed of teachers, but it still can get old over time. So I think we need to look at that.
And I think this highlights the need for communication, kind of specific communication on issues that are out there that the board may not be aware of. This is very helpful, very enlightening, and we can have a proactive, realistic launch point now to address this need, and for the sake of the teachers and the students. So I think this was very important that you both spoke tonight. Thank you for that. Ms. Diggs?
Did you say that we could speak to the staff as well at this point?
It's a board discussion. Are you looking to speak to? Go for it.
Question, okay.
Do you want me to do presentation?
With the staffing needs that we have some lacks in, something near and dear to my heart, and all of our hearts, I think, are the reading scores in the county, which affect every subject matter. And I, as a library media specialist endorsed person, I would love to see, I know reading specialists are great, but to have a librarian at both schools, I think is so advantageous for the children as well as the teachers.
Right, I am aware also that this year has been a struggle with the sharing of Mrs. Ewell between 2 schools. And I do think this contributes to reading, obviously, the nature of the business, and that a librarian does more than a librarian used to do. Yeah. And anyway, that's another great topic that I think we should incorporate. And as Dr. Daniel begins to show us the budget work session, we can continue that conversation. I agree with you there. Mr. Dobson?
Yes, years ago, used to have class mothers that would work in the classroom occasionally. They helped the teacher out occasionally and stuff like that. I assume that's no longer done.
Not really.
I don't know if I'm still on.
You were.
Yeah,
Did I just turn it off?
You did.
Right.
It's the opposite of what you
I'm
think.
bad with buttons. With the institution, though, this year, with the PTO at the elementary school, I think they have helped out, like you were saying. on various occasions, not all the time, but I think that has been at least a plus there. I'm not sure about Thomas Hunter or the high school at all. But
Most of the time I saw it was done at the elementary or right around 7th grade. There's when I used to see I used to call them class mothers. My wife did it when my son went to the elementary school. And she'd go in and help out. If they were having a party or something, she'd go in there and help her get everything straightened up. And about once a week go in and help organize stuff like that. And of course, all the kids in the class got to know, well, we still go places today. You're Rad's mother, so. I mean, it's something that always hung in there. But I remember when I was a kid, it was done. My mother didn't be a school mom. She worked in the cafeteria. So I guess we've done away with all that.
Things are definitely different, but I will say that in the upcoming meeting, we do have a discussion item on the volunteers, the status of the volunteers in our schools, which may be, a different type of that same element that used to be helpful in our schools, and so we'll continue to talk about that. Mr. Morgan, do you have any comments before Dr. Daniel continues on?
No, not on this
Okay.
topic, no.
All right, great.
Evening, it's good to stand up. All right, so some of this is going to be a bit of review from our joint work session with the Board of Supervisors. Some of it's new, some of it's just kind of informational slides. So we'll work through. The goal for me is getting some priorities from the board at this point as we finish up this work session, some priorities for me to work with, begin crafting the budget in terms of what do we want to look at in terms of salary increase, and there'll be some highlights at the end of the slide deck. Okay, so a little bit of overview in terms of where we've been in terms of revenue sources. So what you have on the screen is the last 3-year revenue sources. Right now, FY25 that's what we're working off of. It's entirely possible that our state revenue can go up or go down. That's based on our ADM, and so our September 30 count and then our March 30 count, et cetera. The governor is expected to release his tentative budget tomorrow, I believe. That may include funding for this year that may impact state revenue. So the last column indicates a variance from FY23 to this current year that we're operating off of. So you see a variance or a decline in almost $800,000 in state revenue from FY23 to FY25. Thankfully, the locality has met that shortfall and the shortfall in federal revenue by almost $1 million in revenue, increased revenue over the last 3 budget cycles. So that increase from the county towards us this year then really helped buoy provide a pretty significant pay increase over the last 12 months for our faculty and staff. So the total variance from FY23 to currently is about $50,000, but that's from a significant contribution from the county towards the school division. Expenditures, giving you an idea of line items and expenditures, sort of where our variances have, again, same comparison variance from FY23 to currently. The next couple slides will also give you a little bit of description about what comes out of the instruction line item, what comes out of attendance, administration, health, transportation, et cetera. So in the instruction line item, you see a decline of about $600,000. our overall expenditures from FY23 to FY25 come down to about $694,000 in terms of our expenditures going down. So right now we're operating off of about a $17.4 million budget, whereas 2 years ago we were operating off of about an $18.1 million budget. So I'll not spend a ton of time on these explanations. We'll post this slide deck to board docs this evening. I apologize to the board and to folks watching from home. I was making adjustments and edits up until probably about 2:30 this afternoon, trying to add some data and some information for our discussion. But the next couple slides, like I said, were descriptions on what comes out of those line items. So folks who are looking at the budget from home or looking at our line items at home can have a little bit of understanding about what gets pulled out or how we, what items we pull from each category area. So 6,100 for instruction, 62,000 for admin, attendance, and health. Again, what gets pulled out of those line items? Out of transportation, operations and maintenance, our technology, okay, so those are there for your reference. Again, we'll have the slide deck posted so you can kind of go back to the second slide and look at expenditures and compare it against, okay, well, what's getting pulled out of this line item, so you can kind of take a look at what we're doing. Again, just a reminder, review of local composite index, the formula that goes into developing the LCI, kind of how it's impacted by student attendance, students within the county, property values, sales tax, real income, et cetera, within, and how all those factors go into establishing the local composite index. That's where the formula for our values get pulled in. All right, so kind of a historical review of our local composite index. So currently for this biennium, we're operating off of an LCI of 0.5904. The higher the number, the higher the amount the locality is expected to contribute to the school division. So over the last 4 biennium, we've gone up almost 10% in terms of the expectation. So that's a lot in terms of, it seems like a pretty small number, but when you factor it all out, because every bit of state funding gets filtered through that local composite index. So if the state has a benchmark value for what it pays for a teacher, they then slide that through the LCI, and so they contribute 0.41 towards the cost of that teacher, whereas we can have to pick up basically or roughly 59% of any sort of state funding or state allocation. Kind of a map, or not really a map, but I guess a chart of where our local composite index falls in relation to some of our regional partners. So every blue column is a school division in Virginia. Middlesex is listed with us, Gloucester, and West Point. If it looks funny, kind of like a flat top on the far right, it's because per code, a division's composite index can be no higher than 0.8. So there are several school divisions in Virginia that are at 0.8. Again, Matthews is there at 0.5904. Middlesex is a little bit above us. Our neighbor, I guess to the south, Gloucester's at 0.399. And folks tend to look at West Point, but their local composite index is 0.2489. Our enrollment, yes, wow is, from the audience is a good way to put it. So in the last 21 years, we're at almost a 50% enrollment reduction. So right now, we're operating at about 760 students in the school division currently. Let me kind of, I guess, clarify that a little bit. So in terms of K through 12 numbers, we're at 760. Because we don't get funding. Well, we get some funding. We don't get SOQ funding for preschool. We get VPI funding. Taking a look at class size and class size ratios, kind of where we are per grade level. So it's helpful in a lot of ways to do some projections in terms of where we are enrollment-wise and looking for budgeting purposes going into next year. An easy way to look at it is how many students do we have in grade 12? So that 69 students are currently in grade 12 versus how many students do we have in kindergarten or would we expect to be coming into kindergarten. So the last 3 kindergarten classes have been 50 or smaller. So we're looking at least a 19 to 20, 25 student deficit, just if everything sort of continues on that trend. So as we go to start budgeting for next year, we'll probably look at a budget based on about 730 students or so, 725, 730, just to be careful. So then that then drives what are we looking at in terms of staffing ratios and class sizes and effective use of taxpayer dollars and matching policy and things along those lines. So currently at the elementary school, we have 3 teachers per grade level. When we get into the middle school, it gets a little bit different, but basically it's 3 teachers per grade level. Some of those teachers at the middle school kind of cross content a little bit, so they're teaching 2 grade levels. So our science and our social studies folks in 6th and 7th grade teach social studies or science, but to 2 different grade levels, whereas in 5th grade, that teacher is teaching science, teaching 2 content, but to 5th grade, if that makes sense. So basically, we're about 3 teachers per grade level, K through 7. It gets super, it's not as easy to describe it for 8 through 12 because you're looking at content areas and English teachers or math teachers teaching multiple contents in multiple grades. But what you have in front of you, kind of in, not on the bottom row, but in the next to the bottom row is average class sizes in the core classes. So that gives you an idea of where our class sizes currently are. And then in that very bottom row is where we stand with regard to board policy, which reflects SOQ funding criteria. If at any point board members have questions, please stop and ask. Homeschool, our homeschool numbers for the 23-24 are slightly lower than 22-23. Not a ton, we're probably about 5 to 10 fewer, but we're still in the 140, 135 range in terms of overall homeschool students. That varies from day to day as families move, various reasons that come up in households. Folks can elect to homeschool at any point in time. So,
Excuse me, I have a question. Can
Yes,
you
ma'am.
back up on that?
Mhm.
The dip on 21 to 22, is there an explanation for that?
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
The rationale for homeschool varies by the person who, the parent who turns it in. So I don't know if there was anything unique about 21, 22. It may have been, hey, we're so tired of COVID and quarantine and virtual school that we're going to come back in and give in person a try, and then found that it didn't work as well, or various other reasons popped up. So it really varies greatly.
And you do, I know this question has been asked many times, you do seek to find the reasons from our families who choose to homeschool, to the best of your ability.
We will gently ask. Typically, if I'm in the school board office when it gets turned in, I'll ask, hey, do you mind me asking what could we do differently? Is there something that has impacted your decision? And it ranges from, we're traveling a lot, I'm frustrated by any number of things, whether it's I can't get my kid to attend school, I'm not going to jail for attendance purposes, I'm mad about a discipline consequence, we've got some health issues that we're trying to address. It's easier for us to educate our child in an asynchronous, virtual manner than trying to work with doctor's appointments and coming into the building. And health is a broad, maybe any number of health factors, whether it's mental health, physical health, any number of things. Some of it's maybe frustration with curriculum, frustration with expectations within the school division. I mean, it really does
Run the gamut.
It really does run the gamut.
Thanks.
Some faculty and staff overview. Again, we presented this at our October joint work session. But in general synopsis is we're employing about 20 fewer full-time and part-time staff this year from last year. So we still have, I don't think we're at 7 positions currently vacant. I think we've filled, I think 2 of those positions, but we still have vacant positions that we're attempting to fill. Salary comparison, so I brought this up last year. This is the comparison last year, so that's for 2023. What's in red is the deficit between Matthews' years of experience and our regional partners, or our regional competition. So I benchmarked at 0 years, 10, 20, and then 30. So you can see kind of the deficit at each one of those marks. A key note on this is how that deficit continues to increase as we get to 30 years experience. Lots of investment, lots of commitment, especially lots of hard work from the county to get additional funding for compensation last year, and commitment from the school board to going to meetings and working with the supervisors to really fight for teachers and get the compensation up. So we've closed the gaps in a lot of areas, but again, you still see that when we get to that 20 and 30 year mark, that gap continues to widen. So what we need to do, what I hope to be able to do, is going into next school year, begin having a compensation study, looking at having a professional to look at our salary scale to figure out a way to provide greater increase at each step rather than every year, fighting for X percent. That way it's built in and it helps us close that gap or make it more competitive for us to retain teachers, but also then recruit veteran teachers to come in and help our kids. Because there are not a lot of young teachers coming out of college who are coming in at 0 years of experience. So what ends up happening is we're trying to attract veteran teachers from other localities. I mean, colleges are still producing teachers, but it is not a wave of recent graduates with resume in hand trying to interview and find a teaching position anymore. It's, hey, do you have anybody? Ms. Hunley's calling and on different websites with different colleges and universities. Hey, do you have anybody? Do you have anybody? Do you have anybody? It's kind of what happens. So, all right, so we met with principals and directors to field their requests. So in terms of category with regard to staffing, and I'll add to this after the work session. So as one of the issues that we're currently having at the high school is the athletic trainer that we contract for with a company, with a physical therapy company. That trainer took a different position elsewhere, so we've been without an athletic trainer since probably mid to late October. So we, in polling other high schools within the region, many of them have on their faculty a trainer who in many cases also teaches some sort of sports medicine class during the day, but they have kind of a flexed schedule where they come in after lunch, teach 2 classes, and are there for practices and games. Some other requests, looking at a stipend for athletic director. At one point there was theater. I think if we could get a theater program, that would be great. Additional FTE for career and technical education, trying to expand the CTE offerings. With the Virginia Literacy Act expanding into the middle school, we're going to have to seriously look at hiring an additional reading specialist. Currently, the elementary school reading specialist is funded through Title I funds. So by that, because the elementary school is the Title I designated school, the middle school is not, we can't deploy Title I resources in a non-Title I school. So, but with VLA expanding into 8th grade shortly, we really need to look at having a middle school reading specialist. Projecting out our special education numbers, we're going to be in the market or in the need for a middle school self-contained special education teacher. We've got to do something for landscaping and grounds maintenance. We really, to stay competitive, in part of the regional superintendent's meeting last week, we kind of went around the room and, okay, what kind of pay raise y'all looking at? What are y'all looking at? What are y'all looking at? And again, it's kind of a poker game with superintendents. And so nobody wants to really say, so if they say 3, I would expect 5 because that's what I would do. So I'm guessing most divisions are going to be shooting for a 5 to 7. Part of the rumor that was taking place in that meeting was a relatively large school division that is not in Region 3 the ask was a 9% from that division. So that was a ripple effect to some of our Region 3 neighbors they're kind of wedged between Northern Virginia and Richmond area, that they're having to fight for teachers between those 2 markets. Thankfully, we're not competing between those 2 markets, but that's kind of where they were stuck with. And then we talked about TAs and substitute teachers a couple minutes ago. So we probably need to look at a way to attract substitute teachers along with, the pay increase for our teachers' assistants. So at the bottom of the screen, I asked Ms. Lau to do a calculation for what a 1%, a 3%, and a 5% would be in revenue in terms of what it costs based on our current staff. So a 5% increase for current staff is about $576,000. Instructional items, increased funding for journalism and art. I'll go back and add CTE to that. Looking at funding for technology department subscriptions. So we made some cuts in terms of software and web-based systems this past year. So there's some requests, IXL, and being able to reaccess IXL and some of those other kind of online programs. We've got a math textbook adoption coming up.
You are going back into IXL?
It's been a request. So we're looking at,
Okay.
The other piece that's coming up is the state is looking, the contract with Canvas is up. So we're waiting on the budget to see if the state is going to continue to fund Canvas or not. If they do not, then we need to make some decisions about, do we go with Canvas, do we not go with Canvas, Mastery Connect, et cetera, et cetera. And so that then has an impact on local budgets and, again, those technology department subscriptions. And any other kind of software add-ons that we may need. We also have a math textbook adoption that will be coming shortly. We know we're going to have increased costs for our regional special ed programs. Capital projects, lots of painting that needs to happen, trophy case, and many of these pieces I will have on the capital improvement submission to the county. It's like, for example, the bathroom renovations, replacing the flooring in the high school team room, renovating the consumer sciences, also looking at kitchen equipment. Some of that stuff I'm going to put in our capital improvement program. Some of these items under capital projects would be included with the investment grade audit that the county is doing and their commitment to that investment grade audit and moving forward. So any sort of HVAC issues, electrical issues, boiler issues, I've taken most of those off of that. But we still have an abundant amount of facility issues that need to be addressed.
Are we looking at, I see you got 3 buses listed there.
Mm-hmm.
Are we looking at a
smaller bus.
carry-all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the bus, the county is doing a slightly different process with regards to their capital improvements. So they want vehicles on a completely separate, a list separate from their regular CIP. So we've submitted an inventory and an audit of all of our vehicles for them to review, and so we'll submit a request for additional buses. And then the goal, I believe, for their CIP is to build a multi-year CIP to be able to project several years out. So if we don't get it this year, then next year, et cetera, et cetera.
No electric buses? Not even to give them to us free?
No, I mean, we haven't looked at. Okay, so some of our challenges and unanswered questions. So again, declining enrollment, our increased local composite index. Right now, we believe VRS rates are going to hold where they've been. We won't know health insurance rates until probably mid to late January. The local choice is out for bid, so we won't have results for or information regarding rate increases until that bid process is finalized. So the health insurance rate, Ms. Lau is kind of, as a placeholder, putting in an 8% increase for health insurance rates. So we'll need to really attempt to factor that into compensation. So I really don't want any sort of pay raise to then get eaten up by a corresponding raise in health insurance rates. We really have no idea what the governor's budget will look like. We got some, I guess, breadcrumbs, Easter eggs. I don't know the right phrase to use, but Dr. Coons said for us to keep an eye on the budget, that there will be some good news for schools, but I don't know if that's good news this year. I don't know if that's good news next year. I don't know if it's good news for things that we would qualify for, or is it good news for all the other divisions, or what? So it's hard for me to really know what that looks like. And we don't know what utility costs are going to be. Those remain somewhat unpredictable. Hopefully with improvements from the investment grade audit, and if we're changing over to less fossil fuel costs and more efficient energy usage, then our utilities costs will go down. Also too, as the broadband piece continues to move forward in Matthews, hopefully that will reduce our internet costs as well. Kind of the stuff that we're reviewing, we're still looking at, we're reviewing existing contracts wherever possible, still trying to upgrade equipment. I'm going through a copier renewal to get better copiers in our schools. It's probably twice a week I get copied on an email where a copy machine is is on the outs, isn't working. We're waiting on the repair person to come. So we're trying to get the copier piece resolved. Yes, sir.
I was shocked the other day. Hadn't paid attention before on an item like I should have. We pay for every copy that is produced by the copying machines.
So part of the service contract for copiers is based on per copy. So it's like, and it's the difference, the schools only have black and white copies. The school board office is the only color copy machine. So the rate for color copies is different than paper copies. It's like I want to say it's like 0.07 cents a copy.
Even if we own a machine.
Yeah, because that's how they base the service contract on. I don't have an internal person to fix copy machines.
Yeah.
So I have to have a service contract on a copy machine. Even if we own it, I'm still paying for a service contract for them to come and do the repairs. Usually that includes toner costs and replacement costs and all that stuff.
It just sounds weird that you gotta pay for every copy.
There's no cheap way to get out of the copy machine business. It's just, I've spent probably since I signed my contract to be superintendent trying to figure out a way to reduce our copy machine costs, and I haven't found it yet. I'm now resigned to figuring out a way to, without much of a hit, get better copy machines. Right now, I'm looking at replacing 2/3 of our machines.
Remember the old blue thing?
Yeah, but so I think we're in a decent spot for the copy machines, but we've got some copy machines that we won't even be, they're so old, we won't be able to get service contracts on them. They won't come service them, they are so old. So that's sort of where we are. So my agreement with them is, will you please just take it away as we replace it with either a different kind of machine, smaller machines, do we need to have fewer machines, et cetera. So we've visited all those questions to figure out, can we just decrease the fleet? So those are kind of the questions that we ask when we talk about reviewing existing contracts, our HVAC performance contract, looking at ways to, many of our things that we have to have contracts for have proprietary software attached to them. So as we're doing upgraded equipment, I ask, is it agnostic software or is it proprietary software? Because then you're beholden to that proprietary software contract vendor for however long you've got their equipment in place. So as we're doing overhauls with equipment, part of my goal is to have Matthews with agnostic software that we can shop vendor to vendor going forward, or we own the software, we own the piece. So that's been a big part of my goal. We're going to continue to consolidation of services. We're continue to having debate or conversation with the county on consolidating services to find efficiencies, to get improvements. Right now, that's with our maintenance departments. So we're working through a lot of details on that. I'm going to continue to examine our staffing needs as attrition occurs. And kind of when we look at pure numbers, kind of how many numbers of kids do we have at various places? Is there a need for, 3 teachers at that grade level? How many sections do we have? How many, it's questioning how we're deploying our staff. We're looking at collaboration with regional school divisions on sharing services, regional programs, looking at Rappahannock Community College if there's a way to provide other kind of CTE program offerings or other kinds of offerings to help save money. And the other thing, I think we can have a conversation about hybrid options. We're piloting, we have a handful of students who are hybrid, meaning they take a lot of their core classes online through Virtual Virginia, and they come in part day for some of elective courses. So we can talk as a board, do we want to begin to offer that up, develop some regulations regarding what that would look like, if that would help us attract some homeschool or tuition students to come to Matthews who are very much interested in a hybrid solution for their kids. But yes, ma'am.
So for those students who are hybrid, what is the reimbursement from the state? Is it counted as one student, a full student?
Yeah, if they're enrolled, and these students are enrolled in Virtual Virginia, they're considered Matthews kids.
So it's
I
Matthews
believe,
Virtual Virginia that they're
right, and
enrolled
so
in.
then we pay Virtual Virginia a tuition cost for those students.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
yeah, so we don't end up with the full amount of money because we're
Paying.
paying money back in theory to Virtual Virginia. But my thought is some's better than none.
Right.
And if we can manage that hybrid piece, is it working? And again, where we're piloting it at is at the middle school. So right now, we're not getting into athletics questions and eligibility questions and things along those lines. So the
Right.
students are coming in basically for some of their exploratory classes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, it gets more complicated in other grade levels and stuff.
Well, no, I just didn't know, I didn't realize Virtual Virginia charged us. Back in the
You
day,
get
they
a
did
certain number.
not.
Yeah, you get a certain number of free seats.
Okay.
After you exhaust those free seats, it's, you have to pay based on your local composite index.
Ah.
So the rate you pay is tied to your LCI per student. So not only do we get less, we have to pay more to access Virtual Virginia classes. Yes. Okay, so priorities from where, what we've talked about is really what we've maintained all along is making sure that we're doing the things to increase student achievement, making sure that we can hire and retain quality staff, deploy them effectively. Are we providing quality professional development? Do we have quality instructional materials? How are we working to improve student attendance? How do we improve compensation for faculty and staff? Because that's going to help us retain quality staff. That's going to help us recruit quality staff. And then we're going to look at staffing models for our enrollment trends. And then really looking at our facilities issues, because I think that's as much of a recruiting tool as anything. We may pay really well, but if you're not sure if you're going to be hot one day and freezing cold the next day based on what's going on in your classroom, then that leads to like a physical climate challenge, but also kind of a morale / climate issue. So, but this is, from my perspective. Now, if the board can, I guess, help me with some marching orders and priorities, or at least things that you all want us to go back and start digging in on to begin drafting some rough numbers to look at in January.
But we have some questions, I'm sure.
Okay, I mean, I can stay up here and I can roll back through them if you want, or, okay,
There's good.
okay.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes, Dr. Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Just real quickly, in regard to faculty and staff, not just the increased salary or compensation, has any further discussion or any further conversation taken place regarding adding a TA to the carpentry class?
We have not had much conversation regarding a TA for carpentry, primarily because we've had such difficulty hiring TAs. So where I said we've got 5 positions still open, most of those are TA positions, so we can't get applicants to fill the current TA positions that we have currently. So, I mean, we can, again, try to, once we get applicants and we see a good fit, we can deploy an applicant to carpentry or to, right now, we're trying to get really support in the library. That's kind of our primary goal right now, is to get a TA for the library. And then we've got some special education needs that we've got to meet for IEP necessities. We haven't had the applicants, but that's been a big part of that.
Right, and I understand that, you have to have the applicants, and with no applicant, no job, or no position. Can we at least in your thinking, can we at least look into the feasibility, the cost effectiveness of this? I personally think, and when I was teaching, I almost begged for one, but it's, there was never any money.
Right.
And I get it, there's never any money for anything, but I really feel strongly that it's something we should look into. And of course, if we can't fill the position, then we can't fill the position, but I think we should at least look into this.
Yeah, placeholder would be salary, benefits, VRS. It's probably a $50,000 to $60,000 placeholder for that position.
Right.
Once,
Okay.
all
Thank
things
you.
considered. Sure.
Yeah, I think with what happened recently, TA might be good in that class. So it's awful hard to watch a lot of kids.
Yep.
Other questions? Mrs. Hodges? I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Real quickly. You mentioned the step scenario, and I was just wondering if there are other surrounding divisions that have similar one steps, or are they at 1.15, 1.25 that you know of, and would that be a consideration when we're looking at that? And would that be considered for this next school year, or are you talking 26?
My thought is 26, looking at because we're planning for the FY26 budget right now. I would look at that for FY27 budget.
Okay.
Informal poll of superintendents at last week's meeting. I would say 2/3 are 1%.
Okay.
Some of them had a mix where some steps were 1%, some were 1.25, some were 1. It was kind of a hodgepodge based on probably legacy, tight budget years where you had to compress salaries, and so to compress steps and then re-expand those, it got muddy for some school divisions. Some of them were 1.25, and honestly, some of the other superintendents were, I'm not really sure. So it was kind of, I would say most of them were 1% across. Some of the more equipped school divisions, like some of the larger school divisions who had a finance team, were able to kind of manage, massage their salary scales, and maybe at 1.25 to 1, I think 1.25 to 1.5
Okay.
of the folks who aren't doing 1%,
Okay.
do it that way.
Okay, well, that will be interesting to assess. And then regarding the unfunded mandate of the middle school reading specialist, I know we started talking about this last year when we knew that the potential for middle school VLA going up through 8th grade. At that time, we discussed the difficulty of getting reading specialists. Is that still the case? I'm assuming that is yes.
Very much so.
And we would necessarily build in a placeholder for that,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And finally, regarding the Mastery Connect comment that was made, am I correct that it was possible that we would not continue on with Mastery Connect as it is the key conduit with
Right.
CIP?
My goal would be to continue with that and Canvas.
Okay.
I think we just need to have on our radar that if the state is no longer funding or paying for every division to access Canvas, we would then have to budget for adding that cost to us. So Mastery Connect
Okay.
is a key component then to CIP
Right.
and what we plan to use for CIP and benchmarking and student achievement. But that's something we're just going to need to plan for and budget for.
Okay, absolutely. That's what I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no further questions,